Hello and welcome to a new knitting episode here from me. My name is Helle or Hella. I'm coming to you from Odense on an island in Denmark on a windy summer's day. What do I have on the program? I have two finished objects, one of which some of you may have seen. I showed the initial stages of it as a whip in my last episode, and then a project that you haven't seen, and also work in progress that you haven't seen. And I'll contextualize, if you will, these last two projects when we get a little later into the video. I'm not wearing knitwear right now because it's just too hot. Summer has arrived here in Denmark, and I've even had to close the garden door because there's a bit of what you might call urban noise outside. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for sitting down with me for a little while and join me in a little yarny, knitty chat. So glad you choose to take the time. As some of you know, I like to start with a quote, mainly just to throw in a little something extra, but also sometimes to add a perspective to whatever I've been working on, or something that some of us can maybe apply to our knitting. And today the quote is really boring, you might say, but the meaning is not. So here's the quote. Okay, are you ready? The quote is this: "Are you sure?" That's the entirety of the quote. But I want to explain that I first heard it many years ago, said by Byron Katie, who is like is she a psychotherapist or a coach, something like that, an American who went through a big upheaval in her life. And she found out that by asking the question, "Are you sure?" she could sort of add new perspectives to many of her assumptions, not only about herself, but other people. And then she would sometimes follow it up with an extra question: "Are you really sure?" So it's meant as a prompt for self-inquiry, as she called it. And I hadn't thought a lot about it for years until recently when I was listening to this Buddhist podcast that I've talked about it before here on this channel. I'm not a Buddhist, but you don't need to be, because as long as you're what I would call spiritually open or spiritually curious, it will probably be relevant for you. So, as I said, I heard it again recently in the Buddhist podcasts, The Way Out is In, that I listen to sometimes if I'm walking or in the garden or knitting. And it was said by Brother Fapu, who is delightful. I want to segue this into our knitting. So stay with me, if you will. He suggested that it can be a way of continuing to explore, of not closing our minds to the way we perceive ourselves and others. So the obvious thing to use it for, apropos Byron Katie, is when we begin to make little judgments and stories about other people or even ourselves. Are we sure that he or she is doing this to annoy us, for instance? Are we sure that we're the kind of person who can't run, or whatever it might be? And today I kind of want to relate it to our choice of colors when it comes to knitting. I want to connect it to our preferences. And I've sometimes seen some strong opinions about colors. It can be people who are definitely against neutrals, or people who are definitely against bold colors. And it can be anything that you've decided that this is the way it is. I'm not the kind of person who wears that color. And by the way, every time I include these quotes, I include myself as somebody who's had these opinions and sometimes still have. But the point here, according to Brother Fapu and Byron Katie, is that we should be very aware of these opinions and preferences and not paint pictures in black and white, if you will, because we do have agency. We can sometimes say, well, yeah, maybe I am some of the time, or even most of the time, but sometimes I can venture out of this little box that I've put myself in. So that's connected to what I want to talk about in terms of colors. And since that quote is so unpoetic and uneventful, the quote in itself, I mean, I just wanted to add an extra something that Brother Fapu actually offered in one of the podcasts. He said, "We have an artist within us, and this artist is to manifest joy. Offer it to yourself and offer it to the world." And I think that's beautiful. And then the person that he always has the conversation with, Joe I forget his last name, something Italian sounding, but he's British. He says, yes, we live in a very serious world, but actually we're all just big kids. So that's the element of play, to not be afraid of doing things that actually freak us a little out. That could be in choice of colors. It could be in choosing patterns. It could be anything. Of course, this is just knitting, but we can broaden it out. So don't paint yourself into a corner and create too little a framework for yourself to operate within. I think that's important. And tap into the joy. The more we can tap into it for ourselves, the more we can share it and spread it, maybe even. So there's my 2 cents of potential wisdom brought to you by Brother Fapu. Okay, so apropos the colors, I hemmed and hawed a lot about what my next project should be after I finished the Fox Thoughts pullover. It was such a massive undertaking. Actually not technique-wise, because it was just stockinette, but there were so many colors to juggle that it was just, and it took a long time. So I was really in need of a more simple project, and actually also a more simple color. Hence my feeling drawn towards cream colors afterwards. I've used cream before, but I've just sort of left it for a long time, not sure why. I think I actually wanted to explore different colors. During certain times or certain months, I'll gravitate towards certain colors, and then things will change, maybe in the next season or 6 months later or something. And I couldn't decide on a project for a long time. I had many favorites, but I wasn't like, there wasn't one that just jumped out to me until I saw an Invincible tease the Leander Cardi Vest. So that's the project I decided on, and that's the first one I'd like to show you. And here it is. Maybe I should actually put it on a hanger. It looks a little more neat. So as you can see, it's pretty long. Let me get into the details, and I'll add some footage where I'm wearing it. When I first saw her tease it, that was the first time I really felt a newish kind of excitement. There was the cream look, and then there was the fact that it was a vest. I hadn't knitted that. And then the fact that it was a long vest, I thought that looked kind of both cozy and luxurious. And I've said that a million times here. I love it when you can sort of combine those two. So I went with the excitement. I could feel, okay, I'm feeling excited about this. It's not just something I've had on my favorites list and now I should really get to it. I don't want that to guide me. And I just felt too lukewarm about other ideas. I wasn't 100% sure. Having said that, I do tend to feel that the excitement wanes a little during the knitting. I don't know if I'm the only one where that happens. And halfway through a project, I'll be already dreaming about the next one. That's ridiculous. But I have actually worn it a lot, so I am very pleased with the finished garment. And also, I felt that the Fox Thoughts pullover was a bit of a color extravaganza. And even though I knitted the Lyra pullover afterwards, which I talked about in the last video, that was still color, even if it was a muted color. But I guess that was like a first step into the more neutral and calm colors. And now I've landed on the very calm, creamy whites. And I also could feel that I needed to revisit the neutrals. I tend to wear a lot of white in the summer, apropos. And I also long for something simple again. In the summer, I generally like the lighter colors. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I also really like a monochromatic white on white look that an Invincible had offered in this, one of the photos of the Leander Cardi Vest, and that I also went to in my next project that I'll show you later. It tends to feel calming to me somehow. I don't know why. I also seem to have a slightly different aesthetic in the summer. Again, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I see Danes everywhere in a slightly different aesthetic, garment-wise or clothes-wise. I think a lot of us wear more sort of cotton and linen in light colors, and I wanted the knitting to reflect that. And I think that look is sometimes referred to as coastal, maybe even coastal grandmother. I'm not sure why. I don't get that. No need for any sort of a family thing in there. It might as well be a coastal vibe. But here in Denmark, a lot of people tend to gravitate toward that, I think, or in Scandinavia in general. And you don't have to be near a coast, although many of us are. I'm only near a coast when I'm at at my summer cottage. Otherwise, I'm in a city. So you too can get the coastal vibe, even if you're nowhere near a coast. It's an aesthetic. It's not a geographical sort of requirement. Let's see. Yeah, the pattern, of course, is by Anavinso. If you've seen me talk about the Cardi cocoon, or if you yourself have knitted the Cardi cocoon or just know it, you will notice that this is the same stitch pattern. And when I knitted the Cardi cocoon maybe 3 years ago, I used a cable needle. I was still relatively new at these kinds of patterns. I knitted when I was in my 20s, but that was a long time ago. And I think I used a cable needle back then, and they were quite complex cable patterns. But over 20 years, a 20-year hiatus, I'd kind of forgotten what I did. I hadn't forgotten how to knit and purl and many of those things, but I'd forgotten something. So I used a cable needle. I did not this time because the cable is only over, the full pattern is over 4 stitches. 2 of them turn that way, 2 of them turn the others. And it's really easy to knit a cable that's just 2 stitches. You just pick up in front or in back. So that's really easy. So no need to use a cable needle for that. She does actually, I think she has a video for her Cardi cocoon on YouTube where she shows how to use or how to make cables without the needle. I'm pretty sure it must be the same way that I did it here. Okay, so let me talk about the yarn. The pattern calls for Isa Soft and Isa Boucle. I already had a Surrey silk alpaca from a Danish independent dyer called Sikin, I guess in Danish. And this is the rest of the 3rd skein. So I used that instead of the boucle. I bought that for another pattern with another pattern in mind, but this is really soft. You can see how it's kind of fluffy, and I wanted to use it instead of the boucle, but it could also be used instead of a silk mohair. And so I broke into the 3rd skein a bit. It's quite long. And then I bought 6 skeins of the Isa Soft, and this is what I have left. So I can't even show you what resembles a ball of yarn, but you can look at the yarn here. When I was maybe only halfway, I was beginning to feel sure that I didn't have enough yarn. So I played yarn chicken and I measured again and again. When should I stop? I wanted the full length. And at some point, I just randomly stopped and made the ribbing. And then I had this much left. Whew. Actually, I'd already gone to buy a 7th ball of yarn. It turned out I didn't need it, so I went and returned it and changed it for yarn for my next project. The gauge for this vest is 17 stitches over 22 rows, so that would be Aran weight. She suggests 5mm needle for the body, 4mm for the ribbing. I went up 1 needle size to 5.5mm and 4.5, so that would be 9 and 7, US 9 and 7, where she suggested US 8 and 6. The circumference of the finished garment ranges from 104 centimeters to 145 centimeters, which is not all that much, the biggest size I mean, but you could definitely easily adjust it, easily make it wider. It's not difficult because you begin at the back and then you pick up stitches for the shoulders, knit down here, and then you join. And you could always make either more. Of course, it'll mean that it'll come further down on your shoulder, but you could also just make more increases under the arms. So that's absolutely easy. I have to say, I did mention this in the last video where I talked about this vest as a whip. This yarn, I mean, if you look at this, I don't know if you can tell or if you're going to be able to tell here, but it's like it sticks to itself. You can't hear it, but there's a tiny sound here. So I have to say it feels a little like, I wouldn't say knitting with Velcro, but they were not easy stitches to pick. And that had nothing to do with this yarn because I used it for my next project as well. So it is the Isa Soft. So once you combine them like this, it's like You can see that the strands stick to each other, and that's because of this yarn. Let me just say what this consists of. It consists of 44% organic cotton and 56% alpaca, and it's called Isar Soft. So it should be softer. It should probably be as soft as Snifnuk. To me, it's not quite. I can still feel it, and I can feel it when I wear it. I prefer having something that hits me a little higher up here underneath. But it is soft. It's not like it's scratchy, but it's just a little more scratchy than the Snifnuk, I find, which surprised me considering that it's to a large extent the same kind of yarn or the same content. And I remember when I first started out knitting with it, I was feeling a bit of resistance to it because I'm like, why does this have to be like that? And then after a while, I ended up sort of accepting, okay, so this is a little different to knit with. And it reminded me actually of when I sometimes start reading a book by an author I haven't read before. It sometimes takes me a while to sort of decode this new voice. It's like I have to sort of acclimatize myself to this new voice or this new yarn, and then after a while you're there. And it's like, okay, here we go. Now I'm there. I can do this. And I just thought that was sort of yeah, it reminded me of that. Okay, so what I like about this garment is that I like the shoulder details you can see here. There's this neat little seam, and I like the fact that it's just once you're done here, you pick up for the so-called sleeves, and it's just the ribbing. And then there's I don't know if you can see this, if this is clear. There's it's twisted stitches, and there are 2 setup rows, and then an Italian bind off. And same, of course, at the bottom. You knit the bottom first before you pick up for the button band. And I have to say, picking up for this button band, oh my God. I mean, I don't know how many stitches I had, but there were many. It's a very long button band. I'll get back to that. But I also think that, as I said, it's cozy, but I find it kind of cool. I don't know how it's possible for those two to merge in a garment, but to me it does. But I also find it quite tailored, and she does have and eventually does have some kind of degree in not tailoring it exactly, but she has gone to a school where they learn to create garments. So I find that there are some nice details, and that's why I like this shoulder detail and the twisted stitches, and it sits nicely on you, I find. Something else about the yarn, it was hard on my elbows to knit with, and it was also a little tricky to knit the pearls sometimes, especially for my right wrist when I was on the inside and I had to purl. But apart from that, once I joined, it was just lovely to knit. You could just zoom down there until you had the length, and I really enjoyed that. And I also like the way the stitches are quite fluffy. You can perhaps see, I don't know if you can see the fluff, the halo here. So it is, even though you can actually clearly see the stitches, it still has that halo, and I like that. But I have to say, you want to make sure that you're on the right track for this, because it's not really something you want to unravel. Even when I did the gauge swatch, I didn't make a very big gauge swatch. I unraveled it to keep the yarn. It was like, yanking the stitches apart. So that was like, okay, I can't make any mistakes here because I really don't want to unravel. And as I mentioned, I was very unsure of the length. I mean, I was sure I wanted the long version, but I had also thought, well, she's a little taller than me, so maybe I don't have to make the full length because I don't want it to look like, a bathrobe or something. And I remember when I knitted the Cardi Cocoon, that was in a different yarn. That was Saga and 2 strands of Tilia, both from Fulcalana. By the time I was done with it and I blocked it, it grew like this much. I was very aware of that this time around. So I blocked it like maybe I was down here or somewhere, and it didn't grow at all. And I thought, well, maybe it's because it is really similar to the Snifnuk that didn't grow when I blocked my Borea sweater at all. It stayed exactly the same. So I remember somebody saying to me, aren't you worried that the alpaca is going to make it stretch? Yes, I also thought that, but probably because of the cotton, it doesn't. And I remember hearing somebody say that cotton stretches. In my experience, it doesn't. Something must make this stay. It could also be the silk in the Surrey silk alpaca. I'm not sure, but it didn't budge an inch or a centimeter for that matter. Just wanted to say that when you end down here before the 2 setup rows, I heard in a video somebody say that you need to untwist the stitches before you do the 2 setup rows and the Italian bind off. I don't think you do. At least the pattern didn't suggest it, and I didn't do it, and it looks pretty good to me. I don't think I've ever done that, in fact. And if I was asked to do it, I would probably still try to not do it, simply to make it easier. I'm not too fussy when it comes to stuff like that. It comes in 6 different sizes and with 3 suggested lengths. A short, a medium, and a long. And of course, I've knitted the long. And I've nearly made what corresponds to the 3rd length, or the length 3. I kept measuring and measuring, and I still wasn't quite on it. You know, it also depends on how you lay the fabric when you measure, I find. So I laid it flat on my dining room table and measured. And I'm like, okay, I'm at the length now that she tells me to for length 3. So now I'm going to do the ribbing. When I'd knitted the ribbing before I was going to pick up stitches for the button band, I still wasn't quite there, which meant that I had to figure out to remove a few of the stitches that she tells you to pick up for the button band. So what I did was I made the sleeves first, the sleeve caps, the little edges around the sleeves, because that gave me a good idea of how close I wanted the stitches to be, you know, so like 3 stitches, skip 1, 3 stitches, skip 1, that sort of thing. I forget if that was the ratio. It'll be in the pattern. But that gave me a good idea of what was required so that I could just adjust for when I picked up for the button band, so that you have an idea of the ratio. And I must say, as I mentioned before, it really was not a wonderful experience to pick up stitches for the button band. I mean, that took such a long time. She does tell you how many to pick up between here and here and here and here, etc. But even then, that was still like from here where it sort of begins to turn into a V and all the way down here. That's still quite a lot of stitches. So what I always do, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, this is just for anyone who might be a beginner. Let's say that I have to pick up 100 stitches here. Then what I do is I do like this, and then put a removable marker telling me that this is 50 stitches. Then I do it once more, put a marker telling me that this is 25 stitches, because then I always know, okay, I'm still on the right track, so that you don't end up picking up all the way down and then you count them and then you realize you've picked up too few or too many. So it's a good idea for me, I always do that. I add little markers beforehand, enabling you to count along the way. I have to say there were a couple of markers that you needed to add in the pattern that I didn't understand. I didn't understand why. Some of them, okay. Others, I didn't understand, because as far as I could tell, you didn't use them for anything. At least I didn't. I forget if it was when you joined or what you did, but it didn't matter. It was a very clear pattern, easy to understand. And once you get into the rhythm of the pattern, it takes you no time at all. After that, you just read your knitting, which is very simple. You don't need to look at the patterns, the charts, I mean. And yeah, it's a simple cardigan. I didn't find it difficult, and I think most people would not find it difficult. I think it might be tricky to pick up the stitches evenly along the seam and to stretch it out, but that just means you need to take a little more care and look up on YouTube if you're not sure how to pick up stitches. There's also, I think, Anne Wenzel does have a video about picking up stitches. I think that's for her spot sweater, where you can see, because I remember that was something I was in doubt of many years ago. I think I always did it too high up, and you want to go down into a proper stitch. Finally, let me just say that the pattern suggests 5 buttons and 5 buttonholes. I only made 4 because the top one would be here, and that would mean all the way up here. And I knew I was never going to button that. It was going to be sort of too. So I left that out. And I bought these light wooden buttons that I think go well with it. Just, they look, I don't know what kind of wood that is. Beech wood, maybe? No idea. But I think they match it quite well. I never assess the patterns in any way, but I would say this is 5 out of 5 for me. I've already worn it a lot and I really love it. And I like how you can style it in different ways. And it's a very good garment for like in between seasons, and also during the summer if it's a little cool and walking along the coast, that sort of thing. So I'm very happy with this. Before I mention the next project that I have finished, I want to just show you another sweater I made over 3 years ago by an Incl because of the yarn, and also because of my next choice of sweater and yarn. So 3 years ago plus, I made the Klint Classic by an Incl, which is just a beautiful sweater, very simple and very minimalist, and it has the same or the similar tailored details and really lovely fit. However, what I didn't know back then is that I can't wear this yarn. This is Jensen yarn. I would have to, I mean, I have to wear this as like a coat with layers and layers underneath, because Jensen yarn is too rustic for me. It uses another strand, and that's Isa silk mohair. I've used that in several garments, so I know I can wear that, if not directly on my skin, at least I can wear it with something underneath. Even if I wear something underneath here, I can feel the prickle of the Jensen yarn. And I've especially felt it, for instance, if I have the seat belt across me or a crossbody bag, it's like it presses the yarn into my body. I'm like, oh, I can't wear it. And I'm so sad because I love this sweater. So if you have sensitive skin, steer clear of Jensen yarn, even if it's such a good yarn for stitch definition. I mean, this is like I added something to this yarn that just made it so crisp, and it just keeps its shape. So if you can wear it, by all means, but I can't. So I'm never going to knit with Jensen yarn again, no matter how much an Incl suggests it or somebody else suggests this. I can't wear it. But I love the color. I was already drawn to the creamy white from this one for future projects. Now it's still simmering at the back of my mind. So that also informed my yarn choice for the next project. And here I just want to contextualize this whole creamy coastal vibe look that I talked about. I think there's an urban aspect to this. And then I think for a long time I've been drawn to certain patterns and seen another podcast where I'm like, ooh, that looks interesting. Or I've seen some designer on Instagram or somewhere launch a pattern. And I'm like, ooh, that looks really nice. And so that has been sort of my inspiration, seeing what others have knitted and seeing the patterns out there, which I'm sure is what mainly inspires people. But then I wanted to do it a little differently for my next project. And I think I want to do that off and on now, because that was kind of fun. I wanted to go for a look more than a specific pattern. And I'd already been looking at Pinterest often, so I don't know why I hadn't thought of it before. Whether it's for gardens or for decor or for style, yoga, anything. I find it very inspirational because I'm visual. I don't remember when it was, but it was a while ago that I found this one photo that I'd saved. And then I was scrolling through the pictures I'd saved. I'm like, ooh, I want to knit that. I want to recreate that look. I already have the pants. So I just need to knit the sweater and the bag. And so it allows me to sort of consider a whole look, if you will. And I like that. I thought it could be fun. I don't know. And I want to ask, do you ever do that? Just a question. I could definitely see myself doing that again. So what I knitted was a heavily modified version of the Semper V-neck by the Knit Pearl girl, whose real name is Sophie Hemmings, I think. It's wrinkled because there's a bit of alpaca in there. Let me just put it up on the hanger again. It's a little wrinkled because it's been folded up. I have not worn it so much these days. It's simply too warm, but I'm really looking forward to wearing it. Okay, so this is the first time I've knitted something by her. Let me mention the gauge. It's DK weight, 21 stitches over 21 rows. It comes in a number of sizes, from a finished garment whose width is 85 centimeters to 150 centimeters. I'll put on the screen what that is in inches. And she suggested 4.5 millimeter needle for the main body. And for the first time in a really long time, I went down a needle size, and I thought that was weird because she actually writes in the pattern that she's a tight knitter. Well, somebody apparently is tighter than me. Here are the two swatches that I made. This is with the 4.5, this is with the 4 millimeter that I ended up going with. And here I felt that, I don't know if you can see it, but I felt that you can see my finger behind here. I was afraid that it would be too see-through, for instance, on the shoulders where it will tend to stretch a little. And so I would be always forced to wear like white underneath, and it would be a little gapey. So I went with the 4 millimeter, and I was also closer to getting gauge. I was somewhere in between, but I chose the 4 millimeter. And actually, if you can believe it, I've knitted the 5th size. I've never done that before, I think. Does it look very big? Maybe it does. But I wanted plenty of room here. I wanted it to be a generous, oversized, slouchy, cozy sweater. That to me also looked cool. I know I keep repeating myself here, but it's the very slouchiness of it that makes it look the way I like it to. Elevated cozy could be a term. I did some research beforehand regarding what pattern to choose for this V-neck sweater. And I went on Ravelry and I looked at many sweaters with a V-neck. And one of the requirements was I wanted it to have raglan sleeves, and I also wanted the depth of the V to be just so, pretty much where it is in the photo, and not too low, not too high. And I also needed to meet gauge, so I actually made the gauge swatch, having looked at several patterns to see what the gauge was, and I found that the fabric I liked the best suited the gauge for this particular pattern. And then I also looked at the fit of hers and assumed that I could make the necessary modifications to make it, or to give it the fit that I wanted. Let me show you the yarn. So as I mentioned before, I used this yarn, the Surrey Silk Cloud from Seekin, a Danish dyer. And this is, by the way, the undyed version, and it's super soft. It's softened even more. I mean, it's a little, I can feel the alpaca a little. There's a little bit of, not scratch, but I can feel it. So I'm not going to be wearing this directly on my skin with just a tank top underneath, probably. Although I have to say it did soften up when I washed it afterwards. So this is the thin strand of yarn, you might say. And then the main yarn is Sunday. And I've chosen one of the petite knit colors, happened to be a petite knit color, in whipped cream. I felt really drawn to the term whipped cream. I was considering the putty, or in Danish or Norwegian, kit, but I already have the Guernsey Genser in that color, and I wanted something a little more summery. So I felt this was a proper cream. I'd actually first looked at Avetta from Filcalana, which I know is a sock yarn, but also soft, like this, which is a merino, because I wanted something that was soft and not rustic at all. But that Arvetta, I felt it was too yellow, it was too buttery, and I wanted a proper cream, so I chose this one. And I also wanted something that was close to the Klint Classic, which is why I mentioned this, because the Sunday is just, I mean, for those of us who have sensitive skin, you can talk as much as you want about independent dyers and unspun yarn and rustic is good. Yes, but if you can't wear it, it's just a bummer. I too love all those yarns, but I also want to be able to wear my garments. I have too many garments sitting in my closet that I don't wear that much, simply because they are too scratchy on my skin, and that's a shame. So if anyone has sensitive skin, Sunday by Sandnesgarn, of course, everybody knows Sunday. I've only used the double Sunday before, precisely in the Guernsey Genser. And that one I used the Tynd silk mohair from Sandnesgarn, which is also on my no-go list because there's a bit of wool in it and I can't wear it. It's too scratchy. Anyway, I bought 6 balls of yarn and I still have one left. And this is how much I have of the 5th skein, or the 5th ball. So even though I made it very oversized, it's not super long, but it's still pretty oversized. This goes a long way. So it's definitely not the last time that I knit with Sunday. And when I say that I went down to the 4mm for the body, that also means I went down to the 3mm for the hem and the collar. Okay, let's see. Oh, by the way, when I say the 5th size, she actually uses letters. So it's size E that I knitted. And I know that once you choose softer yarns, there's a greater risk of pilling, but the alternative is that it hangs or sits in my closet and that I don't wear it. And I found that the good solution to that is just to knit so many sweaters that when you rotate them, none of them are going to be overused. So you're not going to get a lot of pilling. So I think that's a good argument to just knit away. And I also like that even though this is also cozy, the Leander Cardi Vest is maybe a little cozier or more casual, whereas this can be both cozy and slightly polished. It can give you a polished look depending on how you wear it, what you wear it with. So I thought that was also quite fun. I worked the collar before I made the sleeves. Oh, by the way, it's a top-down raglan. I always forget to say the most obvious things. It's a top-down raglan. And I was so ready for, top down, don't have to pick up for a button band or anything like that. And not only is it because of the photo where the sweater in the photo also has a raglan sleeve, I was also not in any mood to pick up stitches. I just, I'd had my fill with a button band on the Leander Cardi Vest. So I was really happy that once I picked up here again, I could just knit away. So I knitted the button band before I knitted the sleeves. I always do that because I knew that it would probably cinch it in a little because it was a little wider, obviously, before you make the V-neck. And then I wouldn't know the proper length of the sleeves. They could sort of lift it up with the collar. And I first actually made the collar in the pattern, which is double folded. You knit it up and then you make a purl row around and then you knit the same back down. I think you do increases first and then decreases on the back part. And then I was ready to sort of sew it down or to do a 3-needle bind off. She tells you to sew it down. And then I just thought it looked a little too thick. This is not a super heavy sweater, super heavy V-neck sweater, compared to, for instance, one of my favorite things knitwear's V-neck sweaters. I forget if it's number 14 V-neck. That's a little more chunky. And so the folded collar looks good. And here it also looks good. It just wasn't what I was looking for. And I was going for as a look as close to the photo as possible. So I made only like a single layer of collar here. And what I did was I did it the way I did when I knitted a V-neck. Was it last summer or the summer before? I think it was last summer when I made Crystal sweater by Helga Iser in Sonder yarn. So there you can see it's a similar V-neck that I created. And it basically means that you do 2 setup rows before the end. This is chunkier. I think this is DK weight plus a mohair, and this is fingering plus a mohair. So this one is a little longer and a little chunkier, but it's the same technique or the same point. So I actually knitted 4 setup rows, which I found out when I knitted that makes a really neat edge. At least I think it's neat, and I quite like that. Another modification is that I think I started doing some of the decreases on the sleeves, and I tried it on and I decided I didn't want that. So I made no decreases at all. And I wanted slightly more generous sleeves. I don't like tight fitting sleeves at all. So I wanted the generous sleeves that are also indicated in the photo. They're even more generous. I didn't necessarily need that. And so I just went straight into the ribbing and just switched needles. So no decreases. I also made it longer. She, of course, suggests in the pattern you can make it whatever length you want. But I wanted to be able to have it sort of slouch a little, which is actually what I remember seeing the photo from the crystal when I first saw it. in off-white. It slouches a little. I don't know if you can call that. It's a little baggy around the waist, and I like that. And the photo from Pinterest, of course, is too. So I knew I needed to make it a little longer. You can see that the back hem, or the back, is a little longer. I think that must be because you do short rows on the back, and I quite like that. So it sits nicely behind me, and it's also obviously very wide, and I really like that. I think it's because I've used a fingering plus a silk mohair, not a silk mohair, Surrey silk alpaca, that it doesn't become too boxy. So I really like it. Oh, and another modification. Before I did the ribbing, I think I did most of the ribbing, and then I tried it on and I felt it was sort of hanging on me, not flaring, but still hanging. And I wanted it to cinch in a little bit so I can get the sort of droopy, baggy look, and tuck it into my pants if I wanted to. So I unraveled like this much ribbing, and then I decreased about 8 or 10 stitches, and then I did the ribbing again, and then it worked out that it's just, not super cinched in. I don't like that, but just so that it tapers a little, and I can feel that it lands on my hips kind of. I also doubled the length of the ribbing, both on the sleeves and on the body. She suggests 3 centimeters. And since I was going for the Pinterest look, I wanted more. I have no idea how much it is on the Pinterest look. I think it's probably more than what I did, but I went for double what it is in the pattern. So this is 6 centimeters of ribbing. And I did the Italian bind off and the setup rows the way I'm used to. One thing I want to say about this pattern, I really love this sweater, especially with the modifications. And I think it's a really good pattern for beginners because she walks you through a lot of things. But considering that this is a very simple pattern, I mean, it's stockinette and it's top down, and the tricky bit is maybe here, and then there are some short rows. She walks you through how to do that. Raglan, of course, and then the setup rows and Italian bind off. That might be a little tricky, although I don't think it is. But considering it's simple, the pattern is 23 pages long. That to me is feels a little, I mean, it could be just my personal taste, but to me it was overly long. There were simply too many words. And it's interesting because unlike all the other patterns I've knitted that are in English, there were no or hardly any abbreviations here. So the word stitches, etc., they're spelled out every time. That's not necessarily a problem, I think it's good when she walks you through different techniques, but in other places, I found the phrasing ambiguous. For instance, it doesn't tell you how to sew down the collar. And that's not necessarily a problem, because if you're told to bind off and sew it down, fine, but you're not told to bind off, which means, am I supposed to kind of sew it down while it's on the needle? That's usually when you knit it down using a 3-needle bind off, but first you need to pick up the stitches around the collar. She doesn't tell you to do that, and I forget where it was, if it was the ribbing or when you join at some point, or maybe it was around here. I think it was around the collar. She tells you the number of stitches is between 140 and 200. That's a pretty big margin, I find. And for me, it's not a problem. I just picked up I don't even know if there was a suggested ratio. I think there was, so that was fine. But there's a big difference between 140 and 200. So that maybe could have been a little more size specific. And there are a couple of other places where I found her phrasing a little ambiguous. Considering there are so many words and pages, you would have expected all of it to be really precise. However, as I said, she does walk you through several techniques, like the Italian bind off, the short rows, and things like that. So for a beginner, you're really your hand is being held throughout. So I think that's definitely a plus. I also want to say, something else in comparison to the crystal. Can't necessarily tell, but the crystal is worked bottom up. Let me just throw the sleeves over here. And you can see that it's shorter. This was actually the length I would have wanted for this, but this one is knitted bottom up, and I couldn't try it on as I went. And I even tried to make it a little bit longer. It's still fine, but it just goes to show that for me, I really prefer top down, because I'm always trying it on and trying it on and adjusting. And at some point, I'm like, okay, here I am. Oh, by the way, very important to say that I mentioned that I blocked the Leander Cardi Vest midway to check for, difference in length, and so as not to knit too much before I did the final ribbing. I did the same here, and here I think I forget how far down I was when I did a midway block. It was more than a midway block. It was an almost finished block, almost only needing the ribbing block. And I remember the first time I did that with a sweater, I'd knitted one sleeve and then I washed and blocked it to make sure that I got the length before I knitted the second sleeve. Now that was a mistake, because then meant that the stitches on that one sleeve had already stretched, so I couldn't measure and compare to the new sleeve. So you need to have the same length on both sleeves finished before you do that blocking. And so I did this time, and when I did, I think it grew like this much, I think. And so after I'd done that, I went straight into the ribbing. That was nice. And I haven't actually blocked it since. I haven't blocked the ribbing. Maybe I should. I don't know. It looks fine to me. So that's just a word of advice. Make sure that you knit the same length on both sleeves, but when you knit it with this yarn combination, apparently it does grow quite a bit. Right, I think that's that for this pattern. The Semper V-neck by the Knit Pearl Girl. Now on to the other part of that Pinterest look, which is my work in progress. And it's sitting in this little bag. And it's the Teddy Clutch by Petite Knit. And I'm almost done with the main part of the bag. And as you can see, it's again in a creamy white on small needles. 3.5 millimeter. And this is how far I am with the second ball of the teddy deer, you want to call it, boucle by Gepard Garn, the full skein, which is unraveling here. Looks like this. So very sort of strangely textured kind of yarn. So the minute I saw the photo, I'm like, oh, I know Petite Knit has that bag. So that was a no-brainer to choose that. And of course, I had to go for the biggest size because that's what's in the photo. And I also felt that the big size it would match the generousness of the sweater, the sort of oversized look. And you want to kind of be able to sort of tug it under your arm. I had hoped to be able to finish this before podcasting, but I did not, alas. Maybe there's a small chance that I will be able to finish it before I finish editing. I don't know. If so, I will add in some footage of me wearing it, I'm tempted to say, or holding it. Anyway, this is a bulky weight pattern. The gauge is 16 stitches by 23 rows. And there are two sizes for this pattern. There's also a smaller version where you will only need 2 of the Gepard Garn teddy deer balls. And of course, you can also use different yarns, other yarns. Here I am just going to dip into the third ball of yarn. I think that's a little annoying. It requires maybe 15 grams only of this last 50-gram ball. So that's a little sort of, probably at some stage I'll find something to use it for. But that's kind of a bummer. But no big deal. Suggested needles 3.5 millimeter or US 4. And that's interesting because the suggested needle on here is 6 to 10 millimeter. So you definitely get a denser fabric. And I am using the 3.5 millimeter needle. And I don't think it's rare that I use the needle size suggested. I got gauge immediately here using the 3.5, so I stuck with that. And of course, you want dense fabric for a bag, so you don't want to have it too loose and go up to a big needle size. Having said that, I imagine it's because of the small needles that it's so hard to knit here. I can't knit very much without sort of, now I need to take a break. So you can see this yarn, it's funny looking, has all these little curly loops. Very hairy, but fun. I think it's fun to try something completely different and also to knit a bag. It's just stockinette stitch and it's bottom up. This time it's okay to knit bottom up. You don't have to try it on. So you start with the bottom, pick up stitches, and you knit up. So that's really simple. I'm not sure what you do now because I have to knit a few more centimeters and then I have to, I think, split to add the frame. I'll show you the frame. It comes in this bag. I did the easy thing. I bought the petite knit frame from my local yarn shop. Comes in a bag like this, and it's this kind of frame that you add on. I'm not sure how to do that yet. I haven't read the whole pattern yet, or I have, but I've forgotten because I haven't reached that part yet. And if you want, you can sew on a little tag afterwards. Probably not going to do that, keeping it simple. And you can also, if you're lazy or you only want to do the knitting, you can buy the lining, and I have done that. If I was a really brilliant sewer or sewist, I would probably sew something, but I would make sure if I chose the white or off-white here. By the way, what color is this? This is the off-white or the cream. I would make sure to also pick a cream colored lining or something white so that it doesn't shine through if you use black or a darker color. So this is the lining. I haven't even unpacked it yet. So you add that once you've knitted the whole thing. Pardon the crinkles. So you add this afterwards. And I like the simplicity of this. I thought I can't do better than this. Well, I could buy a piece of fabric that's the same color, but there's no need. I'm just gonna, I'm mainly interested in the knitting, so I thought I would just do that. And I also wanted to keep it simple, nothing fancy inside. There's another tag that I could add if I wanted to. I also want to say that I knitted the tiniest swatch ever because it was really difficult also to unravel this yarn because all these little loops tend to sort of get intertwined. But I like the look of this, and I like the fabric. I think it's fun, and I like the look of this in a bag. I have to say, in the beginning, the bottom is worked flat, which means that there would be some purl rows, and they would be really hard on my wrists. However, once I started knitting in the round and knitted only knit stitches, it seemed to me like the fluffiness changed a little. So I'm tempted to, once I'm done, to sit with a little needle, or not needle, maybe a small knitting needle, and poke through some of the loops to the right side, because I don't want too much fluff on the inside. I want the fluff on the outside. I want it to look teddy beary. I already have pulled quite a few of the little loops through to the right side, and I think it's a fun project, and it's nice to have an addition to my, I don't know, do you call it a wardrobe when it's a bag? An addition that's precisely not a garment, but a bag. So I'm looking forward to having the full look, the full set, if you will, of sweater and bag. To me, they belong together, and it's the same, almost same cream color. And I really enjoy that. I don't think I might not even be finished with the cream color yet, but I'm really enjoying working with cream colored yarn these days. I do have two other works in progress that I want to just briefly show you before I move on to a few acquisitions. But I'm not going to talk about them much here because I haven't gotten all that farther in at least one of them, and they don't really belong here. I'll get to them once I'm finished. I still have the Obsidian by Tanya Barley that I'm knitting, and I've gotten to the part where I've split for sleeves, and I've started more on the body. So yeah, you can see I'm transitioning into different colors here. I'll update you on that. I'm knitting along with Andrea from Knit LA and Jackie from the Knitting a Good Yarn podcast. Yeah, we did a Zoom call. That was so much fun. And we're going to do it again at some point. However, this is really warm in my lap. So I've put it on hold a little. And I imagine they have too. The other project I'm happy to announce to those of you who saw my qualms about this project months ago. I'm knitting the Aurelia Pullover by Sarah Nordland, and get ready for a color blast here. And this is just moving a little away from the cream, but I had not met row gauge and I was hemming and hawing. What do I do now? And then a viewer suggested to knit on it 40 minutes every Tuesday so that I didn't get sick of it, but still made some progress. And then Casey from Young Folk Knits picked that up and suggested, why don't we do that every Tuesday? And so we did. And a few others, including Andrea, have done that. And I think that's such a good idea. I haven't been consistently doing it on every Tuesday, but I have been doing it on some Tuesdays, at least enough that I now have this to show. So I have the garment. It looks very strange in this light. I want to put it over here because you can't. And it does pool or whatever because this is hand-dyed yarn from La Bien-Aimée, and I'm fine with that. It doesn't look as dramatic as it does here in the viewer, I think. But it's a striped effect, kind of, because it's a mix between red and pink. And I'll get more into this when I finish it, hopefully before Christmas. It's intended as a Christmas sweater, and I don't even want to mention the word Christmas. We're in June. But so just to show you that this is still a whip, if a kind of a dormant whip, but it's not been abandoned completely. It's just on hold. Then I want to just briefly mention one small idea I have for a summer project. And it's actually related to a pattern I was gifted from Helena, who's Greek but lives in Germany. And thank you so much again, Helena. That was really sweet of you. She had seen me go through the Fox Dots pullover and showing all the leftover yarn, and had clearly seen my favorites list on Ravelry. And so she gifted me the Paul Klee sweater by Midori Hirose, which is very beautiful. It's also very graphic and very bold. And at some stage, I might get to it using the bold colors. But right now, I'm in a neutrals phase. So I've been looking at Midori Hirose's own neutral version, and it looks really beautiful. I don't know if I have enough yarn for it, but I'm tempted to maybe just buy one or two more to use that. I could maybe get away with using the remainder of the kinu from my Lyra blouse. And I think it's a really beautiful little t-shirt, but who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's at the back of my mind right now. But another work in progress that I'm working on right now is something I can't share until December because it's part of something else, and the pattern won't be ready until December anyway. So I'm spending a lot of time on that, but can't share it with you, alas, yet. Then another viewer sent me a message on Instagram a while back saying that she was passing through Denmark on her way to Norway, also visiting some of Denmark. And that was Petra from the Czech Republic. She asked me, do you want to meet up? I'm like, sure. She was in Odense, and we met up right outside my workplace and went back into my workplace because my boss said, why don't I just give you guys a cup of coffee? So we sat in there in the little lounge section and chatted for an hour and a half, like we'd known each other forever. And that was really such a delight. She was such a sweet lady. So special hi to you, Petra. I'm so glad that you decided to ask me to meet up. And can I just say, she's called Traveling Needles on Instagram. And my gosh, I'm really in awe. And I think that's just brilliant. She drove on her own from the Czech Republic, just outside Prague, all the way up to Denmark, further up to the north of Denmark, where she took the boat and drove up around Norway. Isn't that just courageous? As a single or lone traveler, not single, but a lone traveler, a woman in her car, and she bought lots of yarn that, of course, we chatted about, and I thought that was delightful. And she brought me some yarn as a gift, which I thought was just so sweet of her. Yarn that she had dyed herself. And she brought me 2 skeins of this soft merino, silk merino, in this vibrant color. And she underlined that she'd chosen a cool color, which she knew I gravitated toward. So that's the merino in I think a fingering weight. Yes, fingering weight. So 2 skeins of this, and then 2 skeins of this beautiful baby suri in the same color. And this is very vibrant. So I've actually considered maybe I should divide them up so that I pair this with maybe like a solid color suri or silk mohair or something else that's maybe I don't know, light blue or dark blue or white or something like that. And the same for this, just another yarn, so that it maybe becomes a little calmer. I could also just go for something super vibrant in this. Not sure. That remains to be seen. But thank you again so much, Petra. That was so sweet of you. So my 2 acquisitions were gifts, and I really appreciate that. The last things I want to talk about, I want to mention a couple of books in a minute, but the first thing I want to mention is that a while back I said, or I think that was in my last video, I said, oh, then I wanted to share a little experience my daughter had, and then I completely forgot. And you would think it's very strange that I would share an experience my daughter had. I mean, what's the relevance? How is that even interesting? So bear with me. I think it's actually interesting. So just, wanting to share because I think it's unusual. Right before Easter, she went to Copenhagen with a friend, and me and her dad, we went with them. And the reason why is that the Danish royal couple, their oldest daughter turned 18. She's the same age as my daughter. I remember back when they were christened, it was like 1 or 2 weeks apart. And earlier in the year, they'd said that she was going to celebrate her 18th birthday by inviting a number of young people to the Royal Theatre in Copenhagen for an evening of entertainment. And young people between the ages of 17 and 24 could apply to be one of them. And I think 17,000 young people did. And my daughter and her friend had decided both to do it, and if one of them got picked, they would take the other one with them, because you could take somebody with you. And my daughter's friend got picked, and she, of course, then chose my daughter. So they went to this evening in Copenhagen, and had to find gowns, and walked the red carpet, and there was TV everywhere. And we of course followed them and saw them walk into the theater, and then we stuck around outside like paparazzi or groupies or something, and waited to see the royal family arrive. So it was really touching to see Queen Margaret arrive. I've known her my entire life, and she's old now, so that was touching. And then it was also quite touching to see King Frederick. I've grown up with him. I've seen him always. He and his wife Mary are almost the same age as me and my partner. So it was just a really fun experience for them and for all the young people. And we were in a dilemma because we'd taken them to Copenhagen and left them there to spend the night at a hotel nearby. And then we had to drive back home. But we knew that the whole thing was televised, and we wanted to see it, but we had to drive home. So we actually went to Østerbro in Copenhagen and just parked in a parking lot, and then we sort of sat and streamed it on our phone, and we saw them several times, our daughter and her friend, and it was just really nice. And of course, she told us all about it the following day, how she'd seen the Queen, and everybody was really touched, and all the young people were just grateful to be there and in good spirits. I remember when we reached the Royal Theatre, we saw some of the first young people standing in line and in their full sort of gala outfits and gowns and suits and everything, and it was just really touching to see all these young people all dressed up to spend an evening with the royal family in the Royal Theatre. So that was, of course, an unforgettable experience. And we were just lapping it up the next day when they took the train home, and she told us all about it. So I just wanted to share that. The second thing I just want to ask is that, or first mention, since it's the summer now, schedules and things tend to change a little, and it's probably going to be a while until I manage to put together another video. Also, I'm not sure how much knitting I'm going to get done for a while, partly because it's hot, and well, I am going to be knitting on that one thing for December, but I'm obviously not going to be able to show you that. So there will be weeks where I spend time on that without having anything to show you. But also, I'm going to Italy for a week, to Pisa and Vernazza and Florence, and it's going to be really hot, and I'm not good with heat, so that's going to be a challenge. And of course, the last thing that you might want to think about there would be knitting. But if you know of a knitting store, a yarn store in Florence, probably is the most obvious place, please do tell me, because I'd love to get some, maybe just a little bit of souvenir yarn, something that we don't have here. It could be fun. So I don't know when I'll be able to post another video, but I imagine that you'll be doing all sorts of things during the summer anyway. So I'll probably see you on the other side. But before I do that, let me just show you a couple of books that I've been reading. And of course, you know that if you don't want to hear about this, you can skip. There are chapters in this. Very late to tell you that, but I hope you've been used to it, that there are chapters. And you can skip the book bit and just go straight to the flowery or beachy outro, or whatever it's going to be, or just stop right here, in which case I thank you for stopping by and for being here. But if you are still here, thank you. One of the books that I've read for one of my book clubs is this book, which is Vietnamese. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, but it's a very interesting book that takes place during the Vietnam War and also in the present day. So it sort of goes back and forth between two different time periods. There were times when I thought it was the language was a little over dramatic, or they smile through their tears, that kind of Disney-esque description. But that's probably me being a Nordic person. A couple of the other people in my reading group had noticed the same, but then a few others had not noticed at all. So it could be just me. And you don't want to let that influence the story, because the story is touching, and it was so interesting to read something by a Vietnamese writer. I certainly hadn't before. So The Mountains Sing, and I will leave it to you to pronounce the name of the author. Interestingly, Brother Phapu, the Buddhist, is also from Vietnam, so I guess there's a little bit of a theme here for me. I really enjoyed it. Did I not say that? I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really nice cultural insight into something I had knowledge about from American movies mainly. Here it was a book, and it was seen more from the Vietnamese perspective. I thought that was really interesting. So many cultural details and family details that were just really, really interesting and touching. The other book that was decidedly not touching that I've read is a book by a Dane. It's translated, I think all her books are translated into English. And if you don't know her, I can tell you her name is Helle Helle. Yes, she has my first name and also that name as her last name. I'm pretty sure that her first name was always Helle, and then she chose Helle years ago as a surname for a pen name, and it stuck. This is called Hey Hafni. And as you might be able to tell, there's a bit of a UK theme here. The main characters, completely unorganized and unstructured, and just all over the place. And the books mainly, there are several books. This is the second book about Hafni, but similar to many of Helle Helle's other books, where somebody wanders aimlessly around and just has a pretty sort of strange life, but does funny things. And for her, it's the opposite of the Vietnamese book. It's language. There's no epic storyline at all here. It's very sort of small actions and a small story, if you will. But the language is unlike any other language. And she plays around with language all the time. And there will be chapters that look like this, so very interesting. And I enjoyed it, even if I think sometimes the language bit gains more importance perhaps than it should have, where you might want a little more story. But it's still, it's interesting. No book has to give you everything. So for a summary reading experience, these two were kind of a good combination. And this is quickly read. If you want to have a look at Scandinavian minimalism or Nordic minimalism, Danish minimalism, literature-wise, she's your best bet, I think. And I do believe that's that. This has probably already become an overly long video. Sorry about that. I hope you'll be able to just, take breaks between the different sections, and that maybe that's a small compensation for not being able to post for a while now, I think. If you're in the middle of summer, I wish you a joyful summer. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere and you've arrived in your winter, I wish you a wonderful winter. And no matter what season you're in, I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're choosing to explore your knitting, your colors, your preferences, your ideas about yourself, so that you can maybe, I don't know, go for something different every now and then, or Go for something that gives you the most joy. That's always important. So thank you so much and take care. Bye.